Good day, everybody. It's a pleasure to come your way again. We shall be kicking off our science class this week. But before we kick off the class, I last week I posted a video on scientific revolution, and I'm sure you learned one or two things from that video. Yes, you learned one or two things from that video. Yeah, how science revolve, okay, from the dark age, and then how the European came around to make science what it is today. And without further ado, let's kick off today's class. Let's kick off today's class. Come with me. All right. In today's class, we shall be considering the topic reproductive health. Reproductive health. All right. At the end of this class, you should be able to state the meaning of genetic counseling. Two, you should be able to list the importance of breastfeeding. Then you should be able to state the importance of genetic counseling before marriage. I start. Okay, let's start. What is reproduction? The reproductive system is a collection of internal and external organs in both males and females that work together, for the purpose of procreating. Now, to procreate is to produce young ones of the same species. To procreate is to produce young ones of the same species. For example, if you look at yourself and your parents gave birth to you, and then if you check yourself very well, you either look like your mom or your dad. So that means your parents procreated. They just reproduced themselves. That is, they gave birth to a young ones, or they produce young ones that looks like them. All right, so that can be said that by looking at yourselves closely, and then you see that you share one or two traits with your parents, probably the height or the complexion or the skin, yeah, the complexion or the skin, and then some other facts. So that is what we refer to as reproduction. So um, reproduction is just to create, yes, to procreate or to give birth to young ones of the same species. Now let's forge it pretty fast. So here I have the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. So the male reproductive system here, okay, so here's the male reproductive system, and here's the female reproductive system. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. Okay, now let's start. Okay, now counseling means giving help and advice to someone. It is a type of talking therapy that allows people to talk about their problems and feelings in a confidential and conducive way. Remember, I said that counseling means giving professional help and advice to someone. It is a type of talking therapy that allows people to talk about their problems and feelings in a confidential and conducive environment. Okay, in a confidential and conducive environment. Okay, so I guess when we had getting it right, season one, even season two, after the program, there was an information that if you need to see the counselor Okay, if you need to see the counselor, she's available to counsel you. So, yeah, what is the work of the counselor now? So, the counselor will give professional advice. So, a counselor will give professional help and advice to someone. So, everything that you discussed with her is strictly confidential. So, whatever was discussed with her is strictly confidential. So, for some of you that have not been talking to a counselor, you need one. As you go on in life, you need one. All right, now let's move on. Now, genetic counseling. Genetic counseling. Now, this is the process by which a patient at risk. This is the process by which a patient at risk of an inherited disease is advised of the consequences and nature of the disorder and how it can be transmitted and managed. Okay, now we're talking about genetic counseling. Now, when something is genetic, it simply means that it has been handed down or handed over to someone. That is, it has been passed on from the parents to the offspring. Okay, now, when you now say genetic counseling, it's a process by which a patient who is at risk of an inherited disease is advised of the consequences and nature of the disorder and how it can be transmitted and managed. Uh, okay, let's move on. Now, what are the processes of genetic counseling? What are the processes of genetic counseling? Uh, but before I do that, let me just throw more light on this. Let me throw more light on this. Now, in this genetic counseling, let's pick uh, for example, a child that has sickle cell or a sickle cell patient, for example. Now, that sickle cell did not just come. Okay, it was handed over to that child. Okay, by the parent. Now, this is genetic because it happens to the parent. Okay, one of the parents must have been AS or SS before the child can have sickle cell. Now, in this process, if a child or if a student goes for genetic counseling, now the counselor will advise such a patient that this disease is inherited, then he is going to be told the consequences and the nature of that disease, how it can be transmitted and how it can be managed. So that's that about genetic counseling. Now, processes of genetic counseling. Now, what are the steps or in what form does genetic counseling take? Number one, now it educates about the inheritance of the disease. Like I told you, genetic counseling will tell you how the disease was inherited, how the child came about being a sickle cell patient, or how the boy had kwashiorkor. So it's going to talk about the inheritance of that disease. So it will educate the patient on the inheritance of the disease. Then there will be consideration. Now, in consideration here, that is the family and medical history of, let me take that again. It considers the family and medical history to minimize the chance of the disease. So, in this case, the medical history of the family will be considered, thereby minimizing the chance of the disease. Then another thing under process or another factor under processes of genetic counseling is that counseling the patient to promote informed choices and adaptation to risk of the disease. Counseling the patient to promote informed choices and adaptation to risk half the disease. So, like I said, in what form or in what process does genetic counseling take? Now, there is education. So, at this point, the patient is going to be educated on that disease and how it was inherited. Then there will be consideration of the family and medical history to minimize the chance of the disease. Then now there will be counseling. So in this counseling, the patient will be told about his choices because there are some choices the patient might make, and then the adaptation to risk of the disease. So that's the form it takes. Then another one here. So here we can see a counselor. Here we can see a counselor and his patient. However, I need to tell you this that one of your best counselors should be your parents. Uh, you should not hide from them. Your parents, your your teachers, yes, your teachers can also be your counselor. Then you can also talk to the school counselor. Yes, the school has a counselor, so you can always talk to the school counselor. So this is a counselor and his patient. Okay. Now let's run very fast. Now to breastfeeding. Now breastfeeding is a process of giving a baby milk secreted from the breast of the mother. The process of giving a baby milk secreted from the breast of the mother. Now, what are the importance of breastfeeding? Now, when the baby is fed with milk that is secreted from the breast of the mother, it provides emotional bond between the baby and mother. So there is emotional bond between the baby and the mother. Now, the breast milk is always available when the baby is hungry and reduces time wasted to prepare formula food. So the time that would have been wasted on preparing formula food, the baby would have taken the breast milk and would be satisfied. Now, breastfeeding assists in proper growth of babies. So breastfeeding assists in proper growth of babies. All nutrients, all the nutrients a baby needs is present in breast milk. All the nutrients that a baby needs is present in breast milk. Finally, breast milk protects the baby from diseases. Yes, it it boosts the immune system, so it protects the baby from diseases. I'm showing one of our comprehension passages that we read some time ago. I think it talks about exclusive breastfeeding. Yes, exclusive breastfeeding. Okay, now let's move on. So this is a mother giving the baby um, milk from the breast. All right, let's move on. Now, what are the benefits of breastfeeding? What are the benefits of breastfeeding? Now, number one, it prevents breast cancer in mothers. I remember in our last getting it right, season two, uh, the the was it getting it right season two? Okay, no, I think um it was when we invited a doctor. Yes, I think it's World Cancer Day. Yes, World Cancer Day. Yes, World Cancer Day. Now, I remember the doctor that came around told us that we have different types of cancer. He told us we had cervical cancer, we have cancer of the blood, and different types of cancer. So, here, breastfeeding prevents breast cancer in mothers. Also, breastfeeding breastfeeding mothers return to their size and shape faster because it prevents obesity. So, breastfeeding prevents obesity. Now, breastfeeding provides a mother to child bonding, like I did said before. It provides a mother to child bonding. So, it allows the mother to bond with the child pretty fast. Okay? Now, benefits or importance of genetic counseling. Benefits or importance of genetic counseling. Now, number one, it helps prevent cases of genetic disorder or mentally retarded children. So, if someone, okay, let me take that again. It helps prevent cases of genetic disorder or mentally retarded children. Now, there are some mentally retarded children, but it can, when there is genetic counseling, it can prevent their cases, or it can even help to reduce the disorder. Now, it provides information on people's family history. Okay, genetic counseling provides information on people's family history, so they can trace it down. They can go down memory lane to check, okay, the history or the medical history of that family. Now, it assists in giving advice to people or to women against pregnancy losses and miscarriages. So, genetic counseling will advise on how it will help to give advice to women against pregnancy losses and miscarriages. Okay, and then it helps people to learn about health care. It helps people to learn about health care. So I've just talked about the benefits or importance of genetic counseling. Said it helps prevent cases of genetic disorder or mentally retarded children. It provides information on people's family history. So they could just check the history of a particular family and then they now check what is particular to them. Okay, when did this particular disease or ailment, when did it start? Then it assists in giving advice to women against pregnancy losses and miscarriages. Then it helps people to learn about health care. It helps people to learn about health care. Okay, so that is that about genetic counseling. That is that about genetic counseling. Okay, that's that about genetic counseling. So, like I said, let me just run through it. I said genetic counseling is a process. Okay, it's a process which a patient at risk of an inherited disease is advised of the consequences and nature of the disorder and how it can be transmitted and managed. So, a child or a patient or someone who is at risk of an inherited disease is advised of the consequences and nature of the disorder and how it can be transmitted and managed. Okay? Now, there are some steps involved in counseling. Number one is to identify the family risk, then investigate the problems present in the family, interpret information. So, interpret information about the disease, analyze the inheritance pattern and risk of recurrence, then review available genetic testing options with the family. So in this case, I said the steps involved in counseling are: number one, identify the family risk. Then two, investigate the problems present in the family. Three, interpret information about the disease. Analyze the inheritance pattern and risk of recurrence. That's the fourth one. And the fifth one, review available genetic testing options with the family. So I want to believe that in this class I've been able to talk to you on reproductive health. Okay, I started with reproduction. Okay, I said it is simply giving birth to offspring or to produce young ones that are of the same species. And I also went on to tell you, to show you the male reproductive system and then the female reproductive system. So if there's no reproduction, there might be no need for genetic counseling. Yes. Okay. Then I said this genetic counseling has to do with giving professional advice or giving advice to a patient that is at a risk of inherited disease. And what advice are you going to give to such a person? You're going to talk about the consequences of that disease, the nature, and then how it can be managed, not forgetting the transmission. Then we also talked about the we talked about the processes of genetic counseling. We talked about breastfeeding and then the importance. And we talked about the benefit of breastfeeding. So I want to believe that um, I've been able to pass a message across to you on reproductive health. So your assignment will be posted immediately after this class. Thanks for your time. See you in the next class. Bye bye.